Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Football Outsiders live stream, January 17th, 2022, Wildcard Weekend Recap. I'm Aaron Schatz, the editor-in-chief of Football Outsiders, joined as always on our Monday shows by Ian O'Connor from EdjSports, deep in the shadows today. Welcome to everybody watching us, whether you're on Twitch or YouTube. Please make comments and ask questions during the show. We want to talk all about Wildcard Weekend. Also, hello to everybody listening after the fact, whether it's on the Football Outsiders podcast network or watching the video. And don't forget, we're on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern time with our different streams. So let's talk about a wild card weekend. A lot of blowouts. A lot of blowouts this weekend, although the blowouts didn't end up quite as blowouty as they started because, like, teams scored late. Patriots scored a bit late. The Steelers scored a little bit late, and even the Eagles scored a little bit late. And you can always trust the Chiefs, at least, to let the other team score late because they just do not care. But really three blowouts, two close games that didn't look that close, and then the team caught up and it's had some interesting finishes. So let's start by talking about the 49ers and Cowboys with the crazy, that's the one underdog that won so far on wild card round, and the crazy ending. Cowboys couldn't get it going on offense all game, and then thanks to a bad play calling day from Kyle Shanahan, they hung around. And then they had a chance for one last play to tie the game, and they blew it by calling a draw and not getting the ball set to spike the ball and end the game. And then the game ended with them spiking the ball. It was very strange.
Yeah, the last 2 minutes of that game seemed like about 2 hours with the reviews and the first down that wasn't a first down for San Francisco, and then the fourth down, a couple penalties, and it was a crazy ending. But yeah, Shanahan had a number of play calling errors that really kept the Cowboys in this. It seemed like, from the start, early in the game, they were up 10. We're pretty much dominating the Cowboys the whole first quarter, halfway through the second quarter, basically. And then they had a 4th and 1 on the Dallas 22. Everyone thinking they're going to go for it, the way they'd run the ball and really just move the ball down the field. And he decides to send out the field goal team, kick the field goal. They're up 10-0, pushing it to a 13-point lead. Still a two-score game. Almost halfway through the second quarter, but that was a 3.5% error for the 49ers, and that was kind of a sign of things to come. Because later into the third quarter, there's about almost halfway through the third quarter as well, another 4th and 1. This time on their own 34, but they're up 16-7 at this point. They've tacked on yet another field goal after that last one. Shanahan decides to punt this time. Again, 4th and 1, not going for it. It's a 4.6% error, choosing not to go for it. And then the big one, the one everyone's talking about. This is one of those that I think every single person that I saw on social media, across on TV, everything, thought that Shanahan made the wrong decision. It's not often that pretty much everyone, analytics people, non-analytics people, really agree with an error or a decision to go for it. But this was one of them. The 2:51 left, 4th and 1 on the 49, Dallas 49, basically midfield, not going for it. He takes the delay game, trying to draw them off sides. Doesn't work, obviously, because it hardly ever works. And instead of going for it, forcing the Cowboys at the least to use all 3 of their timeouts, and run down a little bit more clock, down to as low as you can. But if you get a first down and you force them to use their timeouts, there's a chance that San Francisco can completely just run out the rest of the clock, and Dallas never even gets another shot. The way it worked out, they failed to convert. The Cowboys got back basically to midfield within 2 plays, and we're in the same situation that the 49ers would have been in, or that they would have been in, had the 49ers failed on 4th down. So looking at this one too, a little bit deeper, we did this with the Staley decision last week. Based on the risk reward here, the 49ers only needed to convert at a 22% rate to make this worth going for it. They risked 6% to gain 21% in win probability by going for it in this situation. Even if they don't go for it, though, even with the punt, they're still at 72.5% to win. But they'd be expected to convert that, as we know, close to 70%. And they only need to convert 1 out of 5 to make it worth going for it. So just absolutely baffling decision from Kyle Shanahan,
especially when you consider San Francisco's running game is so good and Dallas's run defense is the weakness of their defense.
Yep. And San Francisco just had moved the ball so well. Had the couple Garoppolo intercept a couple bad throws that he tends to do. It seems like most games makes a couple kind of questionable throws that kept Dallas in it. But yeah, running the ball, they were so strong. I think when I looked up earlier, number 2 or number 5 in rushing, and Dallas is like 16th against the run. Like I said, the weakness of their defense there. So just really a bad decision there. And with these 3 decisions, we had someone, and we get this a lot, kind of the defensive nature of it is, well, they all worked out for San Francisco. They got a turnover on one of them. The field goal that they took early, it would have been a 3-point game. Dallas would have only needed a field goal to tie instead of a touchdown. But you can't base it off of what happens after that. At the point of decision, Kyle Shanahan doesn't know they're going to get an interception, and then the play after that, they're going to score a touchdown. Like, you can't think of it that way because you don't know that's going to happen at the time you're making that decision. You have to assume Dallas is going to go down the field, or maybe you're going to be able to get a stop, but that's not the right way to think about it, playing the results like we don't like to do.
Thank you to True Mac for noticing. Yes, JP Acosta and I did both pick San Francisco +3 in last week's show. And despite the fact that Dallas did finish the season as the number 1 team in DVOA, this was a nightmare matchup for them. This was the worst matchup they could have asked for the wild card round. San Francisco was also really good in DVOA, so it's not like it was like a massively one-sided game. The Cowboys got the ball back after that punt, the 23-17 punt, and then fell short on 4th down. So it was a lot of pressure on Prescott, and he lobbed it up there for Cedric Wilson, and it came down just short of Wilson's fingertips. So that's one of the big plays of the week. Yes.
Yeah, that ends up being the second most impactful play of the weekend. Really, it was a really good job by Prescott to even get that ball anywhere close to Cedric Wilson. Because like I said, he was pressured, rolled out to the right, looked like he was just kind of throwing it up for grabs, and Wilson was right there. Can't tell if he got kind of tripped. It was coming back, kind of trying to find the ball, and just kind of fell and dove to the right at the same time, but just short of his fingertips. But yeah, it ends up being a 14.6% decrease in win probability. Again, second most impactful. Doesn't seem like a ton based on the numbers we usually see. Obviously, there were only 5 games that have been played so far. 3 of those were blowouts. So there's really only a couple games that we've got impactful plays from. Surprisingly, the most impactful play we'll get to comes from the Chiefs-Steelers game early on. But yeah, number 2, 15% win probability decrease. And that was a big one, a situation where McCarthy, too, passed up a couple of 4th downs earlier in the game, a 4th and 2, I think, at his own 33, 34, a 4th and 8 nearing midfield in the late in the 3rd quarter, early in the 4th quarter, where should have gone for it. Instead, he's faced with a 4th and 11 here late in the game instead of a 4th and 2 or a 4th and 7 or 8 at this situation. So those don't end up in our top 5s. I know a couple people have kind of noticed that with our top 5s this week. Because the Cowboys were so low in equity, that 4th and 7 was like a 0.5%, but they were below, I think, 10% or so at the time. So it's not going to show up as the worst in absolute win probability loss, but as far as relative loss, those were
the same goes for a lot of the decisions that Bill Belichick made, where Bill Belichick punted on 4th down when they were losing badly to the Bills, where they're not going to show up on the worst decisions because the Patriots' win probability was already so low that there isn't much win probability left to squander.
Yeah, and one of those you mentioned, the 4th and 8 at midfield. In the 2nd quarter, they're already down 20-0, and they don't go for it. It's only a 0.5% error, but it's a difference of 4.5 versus 5% win probability. So it's 10% relative decrease. And, they punt, and I think Buffalo still goes 80-something yards, 81 yards, whatever it was, or 89 to score a touchdown before halftime. So, yeah, we see those a lot where people are kind of like, well, what about this call and this call? And they do matter. It's just when the teams are so low, like you said, there's not enough to really give up that it shows up in those really big errors.
Jeff Masterson says when it was 23-7, Cowboys had 4th and 7 at the 33 with 11 minutes and 53 seconds left. They kicked a field goal. I'm sure they should have gone for it. Do you know the percentages on this play? I believe that we had this as a tiny itty-bitty error.
I believe so. Yeah, I'll have to for the
like
decision.
A very small error. It was basically a gut decision. And here's the reason why, by the way, this is not the worst decision in the world. Because 16 points is freaking hard to get. because the odds that you're going to get, let's say you score 2 touchdowns, the odds that you're going to get 2 2-point conversions is 25%. So you can't think of 16 points as a 2-score game. It's really a 3-score game because the odds are you're not going to get both 2-point conversions. By kicking that field goal, the Cowboys put themselves in position where if they got 2 touchdowns, they would not have to try 2-point conversions and they would win the game in regulation, which they almost got to the point where they had a chance to. So it's not that bad an error.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In the 4th and 7, you're going to convert those probably below 40% of the time. The field goal is a better chance of conversion there, about a 50-yarder. But also to your point, it's while it is a 2-score game, you have to think of it as more than that because it's the potential to be a 2-score game if you're able to convert 2 2-point conversions, which is very difficult to do. And it ends up being, we had it as about a 0.2% error. So like I said, very, very close, just slightly in favor of the go, but definitely can't fault McCarthy in that situation for choosing to kick the field goal there.
So now let me ask you a question as a Packers fan. How do you feel about San Francisco coming to town? We don't know what San Francisco's health is going to be. Fred Warner and Nick Bosa both going out of this game.
Yeah, watching the game, texting with my brother and my buddies over the weekend, I'm like, man, don't want to face San Francisco, especially the history Green Bay has had. It's been tough, beat them earlier in the year, but I mean they're good. You mentioned finished really high in DVOA. I'm always kind of a skeptical, a more pessimistic fan than I am optimistic going into games, especially when it comes to the playoffs and some of the letdowns with Green Bay. But always hate injuries for guys, especially big time players, concussions, things like that we know about. But yeah, especially with the game being on Saturday, it's kind of a benefit that it gives a guy like Bosa one less day to get through concussion protocol. Fred Warner, I don't think it was, it didn't look like the best injury. Not sure if, like you mentioned, I haven't really looked into seeing what they're thinking about it, but wasn't great. Would definitely be a big boost to have those guys out. But I think the big thing will be just Garoppolo. The first thing I kind of think of is making him make bad throws, even when it seems like he's, not under pressure. He missed a lot of had an overthrow to Brandon Ayuk, the 3rd down, that was pretty much wide open and threw it over his head. So it's going to definitely be tough. I mean, they run the ball well, which they've always seemed to do really well against Green Bay, giving up with 285 yards in the NFC Championship a couple of years ago. And then in the super cold back there in like 2015, whatever it was. So definitely, I think it's tough at this point. There's really no team that I look at it, other than the Eagles, if they had won, that would have really felt comfortable playing. But the 49ers they're going to be tough.
And meanwhile, my Super Bowl pick from before the season of Chiefs and Cowboys goes by the wayside, as does my bet from Vegas from 2 months ago on the Cowboys making the Super Bowl. Yeah. So I was sad. I was rooting for the Cowboys, I'll fully admit it. Yeah. Let's talk about the other game that was not a blowout, which is Raiders and Bengals. Where this game was, I think, closer than people expected. It was closer than people expected in the DVOA, so that was closer than people expected, I think, on the field as well. And Rich Bisaccia and Zach Taylor were actually kind of aggressive early in this one.
Yeah, they're not really any huge, really good 4th down decisions. All of our top 5, or we ended up only having 3 that we did for our top 3s that were above 1% in win probability. 2 of those were from this game. A lot of the other decisions turned into errors, as we'll get to in our top 5s, and we've covered from San Francisco. But first was Zach Taylor. Was 3:33 left in the second quarter. They're up 7 at this point. 4th and 1 on the Vegas 31. Pretty manageable field goal for McPherson, who's been really good. He's had a few misses, but overall been very good as a rookie this year, and decides to go for it, though, on a 4th and 1, which Zach Taylor's kind of interesting because beginning of the season, he had the 4th and 1 in his own territory against Minnesota. They didn't get it. Minnesota was able to eventually tie it. They scored on the next drive, tied the game to go to overtime. He had a 4th and 1 against Detroit near midfield. They scored a touchdown on. And then the back half of the season has kind of regressed from that aggressiveness. The game against San Francisco, both he and Shanahan had a few decisions that were 4th and 1s, 4th and 2s, 4th and short field goals. They both kicked. But in this one, playoffs when it matters, he came out. I think he's trusting that offense a lot, especially the way Burrow has played and having guys like Jamar Chase, those receivers, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, and then having Joe Mixon as well. And This one, they're able to convert, but going for it was a 1.4% increase in win probability. Ends up being second best of the week out of those three that are our top three. And then Bisaccia, was really bad after taking over on fourth downs. Dropped the Raiders. I think I mentioned it last week or the week before. Dropped them, him and the combination of he and Gruden in our coach rankings from like 6th in CCI on fourth down decision making down to 28th at one point. But over the last 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, has had some really good decisions. Hasn't really had any glaring errors since the middle of the season. And this one was no different, choosing to go for it. 4th and 3 at the Cincy 36. This one is kind of a tougher decision because it's a 4th and 3. Daniel Carlson's been very good. It's a long field. It's a 54-yarder, which, isn't a gimme, obviously, but not, extremely. It's not a 60-yarder, a fairly manageable field goal for a kicker like Carlson. But choosing to go for it still gave them a better 2.3% increase in win probability. Turns out to be the best fourth down go of the entire weekend through those 5 games. So really good call there. Wasn't complete, but there was a pass interference on the play, DPI on Cincinnati, that was able to get them the first down. And that's always something you have to factor into on those fourth downs. We've mentioned it's not just about converting. There's always the chance for a penalty that gives you a first down as well.
Yeah, and then just some really big game, when things got close, it was 26-19, Raiders driving in the end of the fourth quarter, and you had a bunch of impactful plays. Like, given how not close most of the games this weekend were, like all the impactful plays come from like this Raiders drive.
Yeah.
Yes, Jeff Masterson points out the final 4 plays were sort of bad. Like, in particular, the third down where Carr had all freaking day to throw, and then Hunter Renfrow slipped. That was terrible. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth down where he threw it right to, I think, Logan Wilson. He threw it right to one of the Bengals linebackers for the end of the game. That was terrible.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the final drive, coming down to the wire in a close game, you're going to have a lot of impactful plays, especially as you start to get closer to the end zone when you're needing a touchdown. So the number 4 impactful play was the first one here at a minute 16 left in the game. 3rd and 17 on the Cincy 42. And Carr is able to complete a pass to Darren Waller for 23 yards. So that's a 12.4% increase. And then about 30 seconds later, 5th most impactful play is the 3rd and 10 from the Cincy 19. That sets him up with first and goal, gets exactly 10 yards. So Zay Jones is 10.8%. And then you mentioned the interception ends up being the most impactful play of the weekend. And look at the play-by-play here is intercepted by Pratt at the Cincy
3rd most impactful play of the weekend, I believe.
Or sorry, yes, 3rd most impactful play of the weekend. Most impactful play from this game ends up being that interception. Obviously, that loses the game, drops them from 13% down to 0% for Las Vegas.
As Jeff Masterson points out, yes, out of the 4 receivers, only 1 was in the end zone, and that was not Hunter Renfrow or Darren Waller. So it was like they picked like curls and flats to run on 4th and their season. And
sounds like a good play when you need to score.
One of those curls didn't even make it into the end zone. It was a terrible play call. So Bengals move on. Bengals will play the Tennessee Titans in the sort of AFC undercard, at least according to DVOA. It's the AFC undercard. I look forward to being roasted online by Titans fans when the Bengals, who aren't very good in DVOA, lose to the Titans, who also aren't very good in DVOA. They'll point out to me just how wrong DVOA is about how neither of these teams are as good as Buffalo and Kansas City. Don't forget updated coach rankings with Ian and Frank Frigo discussing upcoming playoff matchups, and updating coaching vacancies are coming this Wednesday. So look for that video on EdjSports.com. Let's talk about the most impactful plays, and we'll get into the playoffs. Most of these are going to be plays we've already covered early on in the show. So, Hey, look, there's Raiders and Bengals. There's the 3 plays we just discussed.
Yep, 5, 4, and 3.
As well as number 2 being the Dallas Cowboys blowing the 4th and 11 with the pass to Cedric Wilson. But number 1 is interesting because it's actually from one of the blowouts.
Yeah, early in the game, this was early in the second quarter. I think we'd had about 60 punts in this game by this point through the first quarter. And it was the kind of the weird play where Mecole Hardman took the snap, was handed it off to Darrell Williams. They fumbled it. Williams recovers it, picks it up, gets hit, fumbles it again, and then TJ Watt picks it up and returns it for the first score of the game, giving the Steelers an early lead and maybe some false hope that they could win this game because everything turned from there. In the next 11 minutes, the Chiefs scored 3 touchdowns to take a 21-7 halftime lead. But it was a big moment for them at that point. Give them the lead on a touchdown from who else but TJ Watt, who's just been awesome this year.
Yeah, that was made it look like maybe this would be a messy game and the Steelers would, not win. I don't think anybody thought they were going to win.
No.
Oh, maybe they'll cover 13 is what I thought after this touchdown. I thought, I was a little surprised when the FO Plus playoff picks came out with almost all underdogs for this week, including this game that our playoff picks, the formula picked Pittsburgh plus 13. And I was like, But after this touchdown, I thought maybe they would cover plus 13. They did not cover plus 13.
Yeah, we had it. I think obviously we utilized DVOA in a lot of our stuff, but I think it was we had Pittsburgh at maybe like plus 10 or 11 compared to the 12.5 or 13 in the market. So we liked them a little bit.
You had a cover. You picked a cover.
Yeah. Yeah, so we picked that as well. It was actually interesting. I was thinking when they scored here, I was on the ESPN, the Daily Wager. They had picked. It was Aaron Dolan picked. Kansas City minus 7.5 in the first half was one of them. And at this point, it's like, man, that's going to be tough to win. And then they get the touchdown to Kelsey at the end. Looks like just trying to get in the field goal range, and they score the touchdown for that one to cover. So that definitely was the thought in my mind too. Not only the whole game, but that first half with the Chiefs. At minus 7.5, I think it pushed to.
My pick for this one from the ESPN Best Bets column was Ben Roethlisberger over 1.5 passing touchdowns, because it was at a plus 155, which is pretty sweet odds.
Yep.
And it hit.
Yeah.
Trust the Chiefs defense to stop caring in the fourth quarter and let Ben Roethlisberger score 2 touchdowns. So good job, Roethlisberger. Now retire.
Not everything was bad.
All right. Best decisions, which we don't have a lot of best coaching decisions. We have 3, because there were only 3 decisions that had a more than 1% game-winning chance change. And so there's one decision we haven't talked about yet, which is the Eagles, EAGLS, ELS Eagle.
Yeah, and this one is kind of, it's one of those, Scott and I talked about it on our Edge Sports podcast a little while ago. It's kind of borderline. They're the ones we know if they're obvious 4th down decisions, we pull them. We're not going to credit a coach for making a call on 4th and goal at the 9 when you have to go for it like the Raiders did. But number 3, it's the Eagles. They're down 17-0, about 6 minutes left in the second quarter. And it's 4th and 4 at the Tampa 47 and choosing to go for it. Now, it might seem obvious, but when we were talking, if you flip the script and it's Bruce Arians down 17-0 in the second quarter,
he's
at midfield, he's going to punt. And he did against the Jets. They were down, I think, 10 a few weeks ago. It was 4th and 5 or 6 at the Jets' 39-yard line, and he punted. And that was in the second half. So this one is one we decided to keep in. Sirianni's been very good. He moved up, I think it's 4th in our CCI rankings for our coach rankings on the season. A rookie ended up being very good this year, very aggressive, especially in the second half of the season. Going forward a lot on 4th downs. Had a lot of 4th and goal from like the 1-2 situation, which are pretty much everyone's going to go for those. But still, credit to him. He knew early on, hey, we're going to have to go for it. They got in a big hole early and chose to go for it, and ends up being our number 3. And then the number 2 and the number 1, you can see there, those are the ones that we covered from the Bengals Raiders game on Saturday.
Jeff Masterson, by the way, would like to see in FO Plus a pull down on the stats where you can isolate certain weeks of stats, like a range of weeks. Jeff, really want to do that. I'm hoping we can make that one of the projects for this offseason. I'm hoping the 2 projects for FO Plus I want for this offseason are to be able to sort by a range of weeks and get a range of weeks of DVOA, and to do individual player weeks. So you can see like what Tom Brady had for each individual game on his page. So we're hoping to add both of those things this offseason. I'm really hoping we can make that happen. All right. Don't forget, again, you can make comments on the live stream. If you're listening after the fact, come live 1 p.m. Eastern and make some comments and ask some questions, and like and subscribe on whatever service you are watching / listening to this show. Let's talk about the worst coaching decisions. And there is one Belichick that made the top 5. Belichick had an awful game of fourth down decision. Look, here's the thing about the Patriots is I don't think he understands. Is Mac Jones limited in some ways? Yes. I don't think he understands quite how efficient Mac Jones was this year. Mac Jones was pretty good this year. And yet Belichick, especially on fourth down, coached like his team could do nothing. And so, yeah, like let's talk about this decision that he made against the Bills when this game was still within reach.
Yeah, 4th and 1, their own 34-yard line. It's 14-0. Early in the second quarter, the Bills already scored touchdowns on their first 2 drives. It's one of those, you're in your own territory, but like you said, they're struggling. The Bills are just pretty much doing everything right. They could do no wrong at this point. I think
you're supposed to be built around your power running game. That's right. People are always like, how come you analytics people don't account for what the strengths and the weaknesses of the teams are? Well, what is the strength of the Patriots offense supposed to be? It's supposed to be the power running game. So come on, get with it here. Get a yard.
Yeah, 1 yard. It is your own 34. And, you might say if you don't get it, they're in field goal range already, even though, or pretty easy for them to score a touchdown. Like they had no trouble scoring touchdowns, and they should have noticed this at this point, but ends up being a 2.9% error. Again, it probably wouldn't show up in other weeks if there were more games, but at the same time, it would still be a really bad error because of the fact they only had 16% win probability if they went for it. So it's a little under, a fifth of their win probability, a relative drop of 17, 18%, whatever it is on that. You've got to go for it when you're in that big of a hole. It's a 4th and 1. I think people still are struggling to come around to the hole. You're in your own territory. Like we saw it happen to Brandon Staley. We talked about it last week. Granted, that was his own 19, but the same with them, their offense is so strong. Choosing not to go for, a 4th and 1, you're going to expect to convert almost 3 out of 4 times. And people kind of focus on the one they don't get and focus more on the what if you don't get it than a what if you do get it. And you're able to take more time depending on when the game is, or go down, keep your drive going to score a touchdown. As it turned out, they punted to the 19. Buffalo went 81 yards for a touchdown fairly easily. So didn't really help them out anyway. And then 4 we covered. It's one of the many Shanahan errors from yesterday. That was the 4th and 1 at the 22, the field goal he kicked. Number 3 is probably the most surprising to me from the entire.
Yeah, we were all a little gobsmacked at this one.
Yeah, it was only 6 minutes into the game. Like I mentioned, there were a ton of punts. I think there were like 50 punts at this point into the game. It seemed like no one could really do anything. But the Chiefs get to their own 49. They're at midfield, 4th and 1, and choose to punt. Like especially from Andy Reid, who's been so good, especially the last few years. He's always near the top of our coach rankings, especially 4th down decision making. You've got Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense that you're accounting for. The Steelers defense, has been good at times, but it really no match for the Chiefs. There's no reason not to go for it here. And it's one thing that we've noticed from Andy Reid, especially this isn't the exact situation, but we've noticed early in the game on the first drive, a couple times last year, maybe even early this year, we see he gets down to a 4th and goal where it's at the 2 or the 3, chooses to kick the field goal, kind of saying, I'm going to take some points here, knowing that his team is so good that he'll make up for it over the long haul. But in this one, when it's, second quarter, you haven't scored and you've got a chance to keep the ball, 4th and 1, yes, Pittsburgh's not going to be able to move the ball down the field on you, but you've got a chance to really keep, put your foot to the pedal, get the first down and go down and take the lead potentially there with that offense. So this one was just, again, probably the most surprising to me from the entire weekend.
Flynn Haggerty points out Kyle Shanahan and closing out games, never the twain shall meet. And True Max says that's a lot of large error percentages for San Francisco, and they still won somehow. Yes, 3 of the top 5 coaching errors were San Francisco. And yes, they still won somehow because when they made these errors, especially the last one, their win probability was already really high. Mm-hmm. And because it's not like the Dallas Cowboys coaching staff covered itself in glory in this game either. So, the Dallas problems were more about like play calls, like why do you call a draw with 14 seconds left? But as far as the Chiefs go, Jeff Masterson says the Chiefs might have thought that at nothing like 10 points, we're going to win the game. So, why keep it? Because the Steelers can't move the ball. My response to that is always, if the Steelers can't move the ball from their own 20, then they can't move the ball from their own 50 either.
Yeah. Yeah, and whether it's going to take 10 points, even if 10 points wins the game, at a 4th and 1, you're probably going to convert that if you're the Chiefs, and then you've got a chance to go ahead and get 7 points there, or even 3. If you're able to continue to move the ball. If not, and you end up punting the ball, like you're still, it's not. And at midfield, the yardage and the win probability you gain from punting isn't worth as much as people I think make it out to be thinking.
You really do convert 4th and 1 a lot. Mm-hmm. Like a lot.
Yeah, especially with what sneaks. I think they say with the data I saw last week, even a QB sneak is like 84% conversion.
The Chiefs, of course, don't run QB sneaks anymore with Mahomes, but they bring in Travis Kelce or Blake Bell, and they run the QB sneak with them, and that's fine.
I was just about to say, it seems like since that Denver game when Mahomes hurt his knee a couple of years ago, I don't think that we've seen them run any sneaks since then with Mahomes at least. But yeah, you absolutely nailed it.
That's what the belldozer is for. The belldozer is for the sneaks. All right, let's preview Monday Night Football with the Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams, last of the wild card game. Matthew Stafford looking to limit the turnovers and get his first playoff win ever. These are two teams going in different directions according to weighted DVOA. Both teams have declined on pass offense over the last few weeks, but the Rams have gotten better on both defense and special teams. So the Rams are overall a little better in weighted DVOA, whereas Arizona is a lot lower in weighted DVOA than they are in total season DVOA. And as befits the idea that the Cardinals have declined a bit over the course of the season, they beat the Rams 37-20 back in week 4, but in week 14, it was the Rams that won 30-23.
Yeah, interestingly, from this game, this is one of the other, along with Patriots-Bills, one of the two games that are a third match or meeting between these two teams. And in both matchups between Bills Patriots and Cardinals Rams, if I remember correctly from what the research I was doing last week, both road teams won as underdogs in the regular season, which was a little interesting. But yeah, as you mentioned, they split their two meetings. Coming into this one, the market has the Cardinals the Rams as 3.5-point favorites. It was at 4 for most of last week. I think when I was looking at it before the end of the week, we were pretty even. We still have the Rams as 4-point favorites, just a half point higher than the Rams. So we don't really see a ton of value really either side. If anything, we give the Rams a very, very slight edge to cover. Looks like almost 52% of our simulation. So really pretty much split. Obviously, we like the Rams to win. We've got them at 65% chance to win. As far as the public betting, it looks like as far as the spread, about 61% of the money, 52% of the bet are on the Rams to cover. So in favor of the Rams, but pretty close to evenly split there. Looking at the money line, 60% of the money and 53% of the bets are on the Rams to win. So pretty much the same for both the spread and the money line. It's a close game. Looking at the total, we're pretty close there as well. I mean, we're pretty much spot on the market in this. The total is sitting at 49.5 right now. Our fair value total, where we think it should be, kind of our projected total, is 48. So we like the under just a little bit, around 53, almost 53.5% of our simulation. So again, really not a lot of value to be had on either of these, either the spread or the total, at least from our model's perspective.
Interesting. Jeff Masterson likes it as a pick'em, so he says he likes the Cards plus 3.5. I like the Rams. Now, I am a little worried about the safety situation. Both of their starting safeties are injured, and the Cardinals did do well passing in the middle of the field over the last few weeks. But I think overall, I'm just trusting the idea that the Cardinals' pass defense, both pass defense and pass offense, actually have declined over the last few weeks. And I feel that the Stafford interception thing is a little overstated. So I like the Rams minus 3.5 in this game. And in fact, I made it one of my ESPN best bets for this week. So I like the Rams. But mostly what I'm rooting for is a close game, because I was like dying trying to stay up through some of those blowouts this weekend. Let's have a close game. Please have a close game. True Max says he needs the Rams to pull through. I don't know if that's because he's a Rams fan or a Rams bettor, or he's a Tampa Bay fan and doesn't want to play Arizona.
Yeah.
Although honestly, especially from a DVOA perspective, if I'm Tampa Bay, I am absolutely rooting for Arizona in this game. I think the Stafford interception narrative is overstated because so many of them on high-profile broadcasts have come from behind his own 20. But I don't think that is necessarily an indication that he is particularly bad for the predictive wise. That he's particularly bad behind his own 20, and a couple of them were basically arm punts. They were like deep downfield interceptions. So that's why I think that the Stafford interception narrative is a little bit overstated. But Stafford is a high risk, high reward guy. He brings you big highs, but he also brings you lows. But overall, I just think that the Rams have more talent and have just played much better in the last 2 months than the Cardinals have.
Yeah, but I'm not sure, talking earlier about with Green Bay, San Francisco, if kind of with you, if the Rams are kind of the one team, at least last week until the second half, they kind of struggled and let down the 49ers who've been playing really well, came back to win. But the Rams just kind of seem like the one team that, not the one team, but between those two that I wouldn't want to play. Had Dallas won yesterday, I think I would be cheering for the Cardinals as a Packers fan for them to face them instead of Los Angeles.
Given how San Francisco has played in recent weeks, Tampa was probably very happy to see San Francisco have to go to Green Bay.
Yeah, I'm not thrilled.
The other thing I will point out is ESPN's trench measures. The Rams are first in 3 of them, and the Cardinals are 12th or lower in all of them. So the Rams just have a huge advantage in the trenches. Kyle Kessenich says, doesn't Stafford lead the NFL in pick sixes by far? I don't know if he leads the NFL in pick sixes. I doubt if it's by far, because no one ever throws more than 2 or 3 pick sixes in a year, to be honest. I think pick sixes are overrated. Pick sixes are often based on where the defense and also, and more importantly, where your receivers are when the interception takes place. If you ran a if you run a dump off route to a running back, and then you throw it downfield and it's picked, the running back has a chance to tackle. If you don't have a dump off to a running back and you throw it downfield and it's a pick six, then there's nobody to tackle. In other words, you're judging the offense based on their tackling ability and based on the physical geometry of where the players are when the pick takes place. I would much rather, and in fact, this is the way DVOA works. It judges picks based on what's the line of scrimmage, how far downfield did you throw the ball. It doesn't judge based on how far the return is, because the return, you don't judge offenses based on how well they tackle on returns.
Yeah. So how well they play defense, basically.
I'm not concerned if Stafford leads the NFL in pick sixes. I'm concerned about interceptions, but I'm not really particularly concerned about pick sixes. They're also a very small sample. I doubt that he has many of them.
Yeah, and I don't know what the numbers are on those. It seems like most of the pick sixes you see are, like you said, where you're throwing it off to the sideline, 3 yards down the field, and it's just a receiver and a cornerback, and the cornerback jumps it, and there's just no one there to tackle it. It seems like that's kind of the highest occurrence of pick sixes, like to your point of just not having anyone there to make a play.
Right. So certain types, he has 4 pick sixes, which, that's a small sample size. That's 4, there's not that much difference between throwing 4 and throwing 2 over the course of an entire season. What matters are the interceptions, not whether they're pick six or not pick six. The fact that he's throwing so many interceptions, especially in recent games, I think does matter. But I'm not concerned with the pick sixes in particular.
I think another thing too, Aaron, that you guys looking at adjusted interceptions, how many times you see other quarterbacks make throws that should have been pick sixes that are dropped by the defense that, could maybe have him not in the lead in pick sixes, and, another quarterback would have 5. You never know.
Yeah. All right. That does it for the show. That does it for today. Thank you, everybody who's made comments and asked questions throughout the show. We really appreciate getting the good conversation going. And if you're listening again after the fact, 1 p.m. Eastern is when we do this live on YouTube and on Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, and in the corner of our site. You want to watch the show live. Again, Tuesday, no stream anymore because that was our fantasy stream. But Wednesday, Mike Tanier will be joining me and probably somebody else to ask anything, and we'll talk about coach openings and things. And if you want to mark it for us, Kyle, please tell your friends to watch the show. We appreciate everybody who enjoys the show. We appreciate everybody who's subscribing to the show, and tell your friends. So, yeah, Wednesday, ask us anything. Thursday, preview of the divisional round. Friday, DFS start and sit. All 1 o'clock Eastern time, wherever you are watching the show now. That does it. Enjoy the Rams and the Cardinals tonight. And we will be back Wednesday at 1 o'clock. So long, everybody.
Hopefully next week, Aaron, we're talking about a Packers win, not loss.
We'll see.